What's up, guys? Today we're talking about why I became a PA instead of going to med school and becoming a doctor. If you're asking yourself the same question right now, then I hope you enjoy this video as I dive into my personal reasons for choosing PA school over med school and what I've learned since I've gone through school and graduated. So med school or PA school? This is the number one question I get from students who shadow me, from pre-med students, anyone in college thinking about going to a medical program. This is by far the number one question I get asked over and over. Why'd you become a PA? Why didn't you go to medical school? Actually, a lot of patients ask me that too. Like, why don't you want to become a doctor? Well, let's go over that. Now, as a disclaimer, this is a very personal decision. You may find some similarities between my story and what you're currently going through, or you may not. There's no one right answer. Both PAs and doctors are great professions and they have their pros and cons. So in order to decide which one's best for you, and for me, I had to look at this myself, it's best to decide what are your goals in life? Are you settling for something less than what you want? So there are 5 main points that I had to evaluate for myself in determining which school or which path I wanted to follow. The first thing is actually the time of study. One of the first things that made a huge impression on me on deciding if I want to become a doctor and go to med school or become a PA and go to PA school is actually the time. Both PAs and doctors have to finish a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is in as long as you meet all the prerequisites for the school that you're trying to get into. But after you have your bachelor's degree, then we start getting into the individual schools, PA school versus med school. So medical school is 4 years medical school, and it's 3 to 6 years residency, depending on what specialty you go into. After that, depending on what subspecialty you're going into, there can be an additional 1 to 3 years of fellowship as well. Altogether, this equates to be a possible 7 to 13 years, depending on what residency you get into and what your end goal is. This is not to be taken lightly. You have to dedicate years and years, and even up to a decade or more of your life in studying and not really getting out and treating patients unsupervised until you finish this program. In contrast, PA school is 27 months. Also, PA school is straight through. There are no summer breaks. So that means you go through the fall semester, the spring semester, and you keep going through summer semester and over until you finish that 27 months. After that, you're finished. There are no required residencies, there are no fellowships. You pass your certifying exam and you're finished. That's one of the first things you should consider and what I had to consider myself when looking at the 2 options. PA school is drastically shorter, but there are some cons as we'll see in just a moment. Second one is actually quality of life. So in my recent video where I talked about the top 5 jobs in 2021, stress and work-life balance were one of the criteria that they determined in ranking the jobs. Let's look at residency. This is the big thing that scared me. Residents, especially in the first year, your PGY1 or your internship, or whatever you want to call it, are often abused, basically. I've seen the residents work 80 plus hours a week, and someone always says, well, the law says you only work 80 hours a week. Come on. If your attendant tells you to go work, unless you want to put a target on your back, you're going to go work more if they tell you to. The leaders of the program basically own them. This personally was a huge problem for me. I don't mind working and I don't mind learning. I actually enjoy learning, but to have someone tell me like you have to be here every day, 80 hours a week or more, and a lot of times consideration for time off or it's non-existent. And especially if you have a family, this puts a huge strain on marriage and family relationships because your life is now at that hospital, your life is now at that rotation, wherever it is, like they own you, they tell you where to go, where to be there, how long to stay, and there's very little say you have in it. And I just didn't like the thought of giving up that freedom to someone else for 3 to 6 years plus fellowship afterwards. I personally couldn't see myself going through all that without losing my will to live. And I have a huge respect for any doctor who actually went through that process and came out and is still a positive person. Don't get me wrong, PA school is not stress-free either. You can only miss 2 days of PA school in a semester before you're at risk for expulsion. I remember one PA student I talked to, one of their close friends actually passed away while in school, and our administration would not let them attend the funeral. They had to be at school or they were at risk for being expelled from the program. Like the stress, although different from medical school, is there. I also remember days where I had a migraine in school and in class, and instead of leaving or going home, I just sat there and suffered throughout the class. because my only other option was to go to a doctor. And I was like, I don't need to go to the doctor for a migraine. Like, I know what it is. I know what to do to fix it. For me, Taking care of a migraine is usually sleeping 3 hours straight and then it's gone. But I didn't have the luxury, so I was sitting in class not hearing a word that was said, just to prevent from putting myself in a bad position and having the administration look down on me and possibly put me at risk for expulsion. More than that, if you have a family, as I did, I was married when I went to PA school, it's very taxing on that relationship. Not only in the school portion of it, because you're spending so many hours in class that you cannot miss, you're spending so much time out of class studying, almost 2 years to where I barely had any time to spend outside of school. And if I did have the time to spend, I didn't have the money because I wasn't working a job. So it put a huge strain on my relationship. And it's actually one of the reasons why I didn't want to go to medical school, because I didn't want to have the hospitals and administrators basically rule over my life for the next 7 to 13 years while putting my relationships and my family on the side for that amount of time. So there's pros and cons to both. After weighing the options for myself, I decided that the shorter but more intense time while I was in PA school was worth it compared to the marathon that becoming a doctor is. The third thing that really factored into my decision was I actually had to step back and take a look at myself. Why do I want to go into medicine? What exactly is it that I want to do? And after doing some reflection, I came up with 2 answers. One is I want to be able to treat patients and make the decisions. Like, I didn't want to be a nurse and just have orders come down to me. I actually wanted to take part and actually make decisions and treatments for patients going forward. And both of these options, both doctor and PA, can do that. And 2, as I was recently married prior to applying to school, is that I wanted to enjoy life as much as I could. They're very simple and very basic, but they were very important to me. So after thinking about it for a long time and mulling over my decision, I decided that I didn't care so much if I was at the top of the totem pole. I didn't care if I was the final say or unsupervised practice as a physician or a doctor. I just wanted to be able to treat patients. I wanted to help people and treat patients. And as a mid-level provider, I could do that. Or as a doctor, I could do it in even greater capacity. I didn't really care for the title. Don't get me wrong, I would like the title. Doctor or physician is a very renowned title and people respect that. But in the end, I decided that I didn't care so much for the title. I just wanted to be able to help and treat patients, and I could do that as a PA without sacrificing so many years of my life in order to become a doctor. Side note, I actually took a year off after I finished grad school. As I was in my senior year of undergrad, I was applying to medical schools and I was just getting stressed out. Like, I really don't want to do this right now. I really want to take a year off, kind of just relax, enjoy life, and then go back to school. So in my year off, I actually went to South America, lived there for a year, and I ended up meeting my wife there. It was a great thing, a great time. Once I met my wife, actually that 1 year turned into 3 years. And then after that, I decided to go back. Prior to meeting her, I was working, studying, playing sports, studying. That was my life. So the next step for me was actually go to medical school, because I didn't really care if it took 10, 13 years to get through school. I didn't have anyone I was really attached to. I wasn't tied down anywhere, and I was actually looking forward to that. But after I took the year off, after I got married, this completely changed everything. Now I didn't want to spend 10, 13 years just in school with very little interaction with my family and life. So this was a very huge thing for me. And again, like I said, this is a personal decision that everyone's going to have a different outlook on this. These are just my personal reasons why I chose PA school over medical school, and I hope you find some value from what I went through. So the next thing I looked at when comparing med school to PA school was actually the final salary. So the median salary for PAs is $112,000 at this moment. Now, I spent a few years around that. I'm currently above that right now, and I'm very happy with what I have. Obviously, yes, I would like to make more. I mean, I think everyone wants to make more. I have a ton of student loans I still have to pay down, but that's another video for later. The median salary for doctors at this moment in time is $206,000. This varies greatly depending on specializations. A lot of doctors actually work on production bonus as well, meaning the longer you're in practice, the more patients you have, the more you see, the more revenue you produce for the clinic or the hospital, and many times you'll get a percentage of that back as part of your salary. So the busier you are, the more you'll make. But at a median salary of $112,000 for PAs versus median salary of $206,000 for physicians, for the years I was giving up looking at going to medical school, I decided in this case again, PA school was more appealing to me. So the next thing I looked at was actually the matching process and the flexibility of the two professions. Now, when I first looked into med school when I was way back in high school, I had no idea what the matching process was, didn't know anything about it, how it worked. I thought at that time the hardest part of med school is actually getting into med school. My thoughts on that have changed. Yes, the competition getting into med school, about 40% of people who apply get into med school. Interestingly, about 32 to 33% of people who apply to PA school get in. So actually getting into PA school is actually more competitive than med school at this moment. It's still very competitive to get into medical school, but I would argue that it's even more competitive once you're in med school to actually stand out against your peers. So this is very important because how well you do on your test in school directly correlate with what residencies you can get into. So unfortunately, there are actually less residencies than there are medical students every year. Every year, there are over 1,000 medical students across the US who do not get into a residency. So this means they have to do something for a year and reapply the next year to hopefully get in and match with a residency. Typically without the residency, you cannot actually practice medicine. And some people who actually match into the residencies don't get into the specialty that they actually desire. So when I was in my rotations, there was actually a medical student I was on rotation with. One day he came in and he was just not himself. And so I was like, hey man, what's going on? And he informed me that he was not matched into his program. He had applied to 30 ortho residencies, and at the very bottom of 30, residency number 31 is what he got matched into. 31 was radiology. Now, I've told other people this story before, and they're like, oh, radiologist, man, he's gonna love it. Well, he didn't. Like, that's not the point. Not that it's not a great profession. It is. The fact of the matter is he wanted to go into ortho. After applying to so many, having so many interviews, he was not able to get in because the field is so competitive. So think about that situation. You go to undergrad for 4 years, you take the MCAT, you pass all your prerequisites, you get accepted into medical school, you bust your butt for 2, 3, 4 years, and as you apply to residencies, you get matched into something that you don't want to go into. That's a dagger to the heart. And I knew that there was a risk in that happening if I went to medical school, and just another factor that led me to going towards the PA route instead of the med school route. In contrast, once you graduate as a PA, you have to take your licensing exam. And in your licensing exam, you are tested over everything from cardiology to urology to neurology. I mean, you are tested across the board. So once you get your license, you are actually licensed to go into any field at any point in time. There are no required residencies, there are no fellowships. Once you graduate and you pass your certifying exam, you are now free to go into any specialty at any point in time. There's no gatekeeping there other than the number of jobs available. And this freedom also pushed me towards going towards the PA route instead of the medical route. So like I said earlier, this is one of the most common questions I get from so many medical students and so many people shadowing me. I hope that if you're asking yourself that question, I hope you found this information valuable, because these were my own thought process and some of the things I considered when I was making the decision. Both professions are great. Both are really good things to get into, but there are pros and cons of both that you need to take into consideration. If you gained any value from this video, please leave me a like and subscribe below. Leave me a comment below if there's anything you want to see in a future video, and I'll see you next time.